Eugene Mulero here for Transport Topics, and joining us today is Pat Jones. He's Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer at the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association. Pat, thank you for being here.
Eugene, thanks for having me.
First, I want to get your takeaways from what you're hearing from President Trump on infrastructure. How do you react to his approach and what he's telling the country about how he wants to finance highway and bridge projects?
Well, Eugene, first of all, I'm really happy that President Trump has emphasized the importance of infrastructure, both in his campaign speeches and in his inaugural address. He's talked about the need to rebuild the nation's infrastructure. So we're excited about that. We like the fact that he is emphasizing infrastructure, and that has brought a lot of people into the conversation about building new roads and bridges, about rebuilding the infrastructure that we have, schools, highways, water systems, etc. They have a concept paper from Mr. Ross and Mr. Navarro that talks about this $1 trillion plan. And I call it a concept paper because that's how I see it right now. So I don't think we can learn a whole lot from that paper, but we're going to learn a lot more in the coming days as Secretary-designate Chao takes office and she starts to build her team. But the bottom line is we are encouraged that the Trump administration is emphasizing infrastructure and inviting comment from all sectors of the economy.
And you recently wrote an op-ed in the Hill newspaper this month, and I want to quote for accuracy because it's something that I would like you to expand on. You wrote, "The solution we devise will require innovative thought and a combination of public and private financing mechanisms." That is very similar to what we heard from Elaine Chao when she was before the Senate Commerce Committee. My question is, what is your expectation that the Chao-led DOT and the Trump White House will advance P3s, public-private partnerships?
Well, I think it's a little early to tell what the Trump administration and the U.S. Department of Transportation under Secretary Chao will do. I think that rebuilding our infrastructure is going to take a combination of factors and forces. We're going to need not only public money, federal money, but we're going to need private investment in infrastructure as well. P3s are not a panacea. P3s work well under certain circumstances where there is significant traffic and volume that can support toll finance transportation. So I think we really need to see a combination of investment that is both public and private.
Well, how do you respond to skeptics and critics of tolling when they hear from your organization that you would like to see the federal ban on tolling interstate highways eliminated? That is something that I'm sure you're probably going to expect pushback if Congress or the Trump White House proceeds with that.
That's a very interesting question. And you know, sometimes we hear people talk about tolling as being toxic or evil. And really, tolling is no more toxic or evil than the gas tax. It's simply one of the many mechanisms that are used to pay for our transportation infrastructure. We use a saying that says there are no free roads, and that's very true. No matter how you slice it, you're going to need new revenue streams and new revenue sources to build, maintain, operate, and rebuild our vital infrastructure. The Congress has not increased the gas tax since 1993, and as a consequence, we are seeing a tremendous decline in the revenues to the Federal Highway Trust Fund. And as a matter of fact, between 2008 and the end of the FAST Act, Congress will have transferred from the general fund more than $140 billion to support the Federal Highway Trust Fund. So the gas tax today is not sufficient to support all of our infrastructure needs. So what do? Well, tolling has a long and storied history in this country. When you think about the Pennsylvania Turnpike, when it opened in 1940 with 140 miles of road that were built in 2 years on time and under budget, that road became America's first superhighway. And many other states emulated that model to create highways connecting cities in their states that would not have happened otherwise. So, to the critics of tolling, I would say tolling is simply one more method to fund and finance transportation infrastructure. Now, getting to your question about lifting the ban on tolling interstate highways. So, the Congress, over a period of years, has been working and sort of nibbling away at that overall ban. For instance, we know that you can, under current law, we can implement tolls on new portions of the interstate highway. If you're going to add new lanes to an existing facility, provided that once that facility is finished, the number of non-tolled lanes remains the same, that's allowed. You're allowed to use tolling to reconstruct or replace bridges or tunnels on the interstate highway system and convert that to a toll facility. That's permitted now. So there are exceptions to that rule. When we say we'd like to lift the ban on tolling interstate highways, we're not suggesting that every state should move to toll their interstate highways. We're simply saying, let's give the states an option to use to rebuild their interstate highways. In some states, it's politically unpalatable to increase the gas tax. We've seen that at the federal level, but people might be willing to accept a toll. In fact, in a study that was produced by Kelton Global in July of 2016, they asked a couple of significant questions and said, they got these responses. 72% of Americans would support the use of tolling to build or rebuild infrastructure if they knew that funds from other sources were inadequate. And 69% of Americans said they would be likely to use a toll facility if they knew that they would be able to avoid congestion and to save time. So, to summarize, we're not saying that every state should use tolling to rebuild its interstate highways. We're simply saying, let's give the states that option.
What kind of feedback or indication are you getting from congressional leaders that there's going to be an appetite, support for including P3s or in tolling projects and authority? And I know you and I have talked about this, that this is sometimes a state issue, but I'm focusing more out of Capitol Hill, that P3s is going to be part of that recipe in an infrastructure package either this year or next year.
Honestly, Eugene, I don't know. I think the Congress passed MAP 21 back in 2015. It's a 5-year bill. I think maybe they're not so excited, or they might be a little reluctant to go in and redo their transportation bill until it's ready. So, but we have maintained communications with members of Congress and the key transportation committees. We're engaged in a continuous education campaign to help people understand the power and the effectiveness of toll-financed transportation as one of the tools among many in the transportation funding and finance toolbox.
And speaking of educating the public and stakeholders about tolling, we spoke and you told me that you convened stakeholders last year for what you called the Transportation Visioning Summit. Can you talk a little bit about that summit and also what are some next steps this year?
Sure. So we did convene a Transportation Visioning Summit on November 30th in Washington, D.C. We held it at the Pew Charitable Trust, a good venue in downtown Washington, D.C. And we had leaders of 18 transportation-related associations, including the American Trucking Associations, AASHTO, ARTBA, the American Society of Civil Engineers, ITS America, the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, and a range of others. And we talked about things like new technologies, automated and connected vehicles, autonomous vehicles, what's going to happen in the future of funding. Where are there areas where these diverse transportation associations can work together to solve common problems? So I think one of the key takeaways from that meeting is the recognition that autonomous vehicles are coming, and that it was almost a universal belief that they're coming and we need to find ways to embrace that. But the other big takeaway was the desire to continue the conversation in informal ways. Not that we have to have a strict agenda for every meeting, but there were people in the room who recognized there are a lot of other people in this room who can influence the issues that are important to us that we don't talk to on a regular basis, and we ought to do that. So I think in the coming months, we'll reassemble the group. There may be a few others who participate. Some may decide not to participate, but we're going to reassemble the group and continue the conversation.
And we'll follow up on that. And before we wrap up, I do want you to weigh in on what's happening in Rhode Island. Based on our reporting, what we see is this is where the trucking industry and the state government are really colliding, if I can use that term, on a proposal that from the governor to proceed with truck-only tolling systems to repair aging bridges. I would like to ask you, what do you say to critics of that approach, and is that the way that Rhode Island and other states similar to Rhode Island's, what Rhode Island's going through, for them to pay for infrastructure repairs?
Well, the first thing, Eugene, I want to say about this is that we recognize that the freight of this country rides on the wheels of 18-wheelers. There is no doubt about the importance of the trucking industry in every state in America. I used to work for the American Trucking Associations back in the 1980s and 90s, and I know how important trucking is. Without trucks, America stops. If you got it, a truck brought it. These are factual-based statements about the trucking industry. Now, in the case of Rhode Island is last, 50th out of 50 states in terms of the percentage of structurally deficient bridges based on deck area. Now, this state wants to improve its bridges because it means improving the economy, it means improving mobility, it means avoiding the possibility that there will be accidents or bridge collapses, etc., as we've seen elsewhere in the country. They determined, based on their studies, that 70% of the vehicle-caused damage to the bridges in Rhode Island are caused by heavy commercial trucks. Only 30% of the vehicle-caused damage comes from other vehicles. And at the same time, that trucks contribute only 19% of the revenues to support that infrastructure. This is based on Rhode Island DOT studies and Government Accountability Office studies. So they put together a plan to rebuild or replace 14 structurally deficient bridges that are on the interstate highways in Rhode Island. And they're doing this under a memorandum of understanding with the Federal Highway Administration because 23 U.S. Code Section 129 allows a state to replace a toll-free bridge or tunnel and convert the bridge or tunnel to a toll facility. So this is perfectly within the laws of the United States of America affecting transportation. So I think it was a challenging move for the governor and the state legislature, but it's one that I think everybody is going to benefit from. The trucking industry is going to benefit by having a better facility in Rhode Island. They will benefit from not having to divert in the case of a bridge that collapses or cannot sustain the loads that heavy commercial trucks provide. Do you expect that if the Rhode Island plan is successful, according to its proponents, that this is something that other states will emulate? I don't know. I think it's too early to tell. I think Rhode Island is a unique case in this circumstance. It's the smallest state. It has the worst, as we talked about, 50th out of 50 in structurally deficient bridges. They need to do something dramatic. This is dramatic, and I think it's going to help the economy of the country, of Rhode Island, and the trucking industry by providing a better facility in Rhode Island.
Pat, we're going to stay tuned to what's happening in Rhode Island on Capitol Hill with the infrastructure funding. Thank you for joining us. Check out ttnews.com every Tuesday for Capitol Agenda and ttnews.com for all your latest freight updates. Thank you.